Hello and welcome to Movies for Dumb Guys. I'm your host, Joe Johnson. And as always, I am joined by Ryan Sharp.
The force is strong with this one.
And Tim Williams.
Day one of Wonga.
And they recently released the standalone solo movie. So we are going to review that, and we're going to look back at the entire run of Star Wars movies and rate them on their merit. Now, when, so far I think Disney has had a pretty good track record with the Star Wars movies for the most part.
Really?
I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. We'll talk about where it ranks on my list. Last Jedi, Rogue One, I really thoroughly enjoyed. So when they announced the solo movie, I wanted to go in with an open mind. I didn't want to go in asking it to prove something to me. I just wanted to go in and be entertained. And at first, I don't know. When they announced the casting and everything, I was kind of like,
I got a bad feeling about this.
But then the trailers got a little better, and I was like, okay, maybe this is going to work. I still have other preferences for actors that could have played Han Solo. But finally, the day came where I found myself sitting in the movie theater watching it, and I was not entertained at all. I was bored. I didn't like the storyline. I didn't like the characters. And sadly, I didn't like the actor in the role of Han Solo. The only thing that redeemed the movie for me was Donald Glover's portrayal of Lando. I felt like he knocked it out of the park. I thought he got the nuances right, the mannerisms, the voice, the attitude, the charm and charisma. I thought he got all that right. But as far as the rest of the movie, I thought it was a throwaway. Easily forgettable. No desire to pick it up on DVD. No desire to ever see it again. Ryan, your thoughts?
I 100% disagree. I actually, I'm not a Star Wars guru by any means. I don't nerd out like a lot of people do for Star Wars. And I went in to see this movie with, no expectations. And I walked away going, wow, that was actually pretty good. I liked it. I don't see why you guys have a problem with the casting of who played Han Solo. I thought he actually did a good job. It's hard to capture Harrison Ford exactly, but I thought he did a pretty decent job of catching that side smile, smirky, sarcastic-y type of guy. Hey, this is my opinion. I see those faces over there.
Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows it?
You're lucky you control the board. That's all I can say. No, I thought he did. I had no problem with the casting of that. I know that was a big topic of discussion for a lot of people. I thought he did a good job. I agree with you absolutely about Donald Glover or Childish Gambino, if that's what you want to call him. I thought he did do a great job of capturing his mannerisms and his swag and all that. The story, it is what it is, and I could make that same argument that you made about all the Star Wars movies.
But the other Star Wars movies, even though some people say that The Force Awakens is sort of a reboot of the original Star Wars, I don't have a problem with it because it had that Star Wars feel to it. This movie felt like a heist movie, like someone dusted off an old heist script and said, "Well, let's make this a Star Wars movie," and it didn't, to me, have a Star Wars feel to it.
Well, it talked a lot about what happened though, like how we got the Millennium Falcon and.
Well, that's the other issue I have, and I'm going to bring that up in a second.
Okay.
Tim, I'm going to throw it over to Tim, and let's hear your opinion.
My expectations were very low due to the review that I had gotten that morning or the day before from Richie, who's not here today. But he was saying that this movie just destroyed every other Star Wars movie and whatever, so I was going in there with very low expectations. The first few minutes, it did take me a little while to get used to his portrayal of Han Solo, but I would say after like 5 minutes, I didn't really notice it at all. You and I agree though that there probably would have been a better pick, but I don't think. But I don't think he was really trying that hard uh, to imitate Harrison Ford. But I agree that Lando Calrissian was probably the best character in the movie.
When they
But I liked it overall. I liked it. Is it the greatest Star Wars movie? No. Is it the worst Star Wars movie? No. I'd place it somewhere in the middle, personally.
when they
But
rebooted Star Trek with Chris Pine, I was like, oh my God, how is he going to fill Shatner's shoes? And I think the reason it worked is he kind of embodied Shatner, but he kind of did his own thing. But you saw the Shatner-esque performance, and I think that's why that movie works. And now it's kind of off doing its
well,
own
you and I
thing.
were talking about it a little bit. I feel that this is going to be a trilogy, or that their plan is they want to make this a trilogy, or they're just going to incorporate it in the other one-shot movies like Boba Fett and Obi-Wan if they actually do those. Um, so I think over time they're going to try to make him more like, because he was almost to me like a happy-go-lucky character in this. Obviously, the Harrison Ford Han Solo that we see in the original movies is not that. He's like totally the opposite of that. So I think that that's what they want to do is show how he became that kind of like, grumpy, like kind of like what they did with Obi-Wan in the prequels. Like, he gets closer and closer to the Obi-Wan that we know by the end of Revenge of the Sith. I
Right.
think that's what I would hope that is what their
Well,
plan is.
we'll see. Now, getting back to your point, Ryan, about introducing things that have been referred to in the original trilogy, I expected that. I thought some of it was cool, but I thought there was too much of it. They tried to put a lot of stuff into this one movie. And I feel like the writers had a roundtable at the beginning of the pre-production process on this movie and said, all right, let's rewatch the original trilogy and let's take notes on any little reference that was thrown out. So imagine they're watching the movies and they're like, okay, the Kessel Run, write that down. When Lando says, what have you done to my ship? Oh, he's not your ship. It's not your ship. You lost him to me fair and square. Write that down. And so I felt like they created this list of references from the original trilogy and then said, all right, now put all this into this movie. And I don't think that's the way you make a movie. You don't get all these little points and then try and write a whole movie around that. You put it in where it fits, and if it doesn't fit in this movie, you could put it in the next movie.
Where do you think one was forced? Because maybe they were writing it and were like, oh, we can throw that line in there.
I just thought there was too much of it. I thought there were too many references to little asides from the original trilogy. It didn't all have to be in one movie.
But
And
how did it ruin it, I guess?
I just thought it was too much. Just too much. Let's talk about the story.
Too much of a good thing?
Well, not a good thing, but let's look at the story. How would you describe this story? Most good movies, you should be able to simply describe the plot, when you're describing it to another person. But when you look at the story of Solo, all right, so they gloss over, and Tim and I were talking about this earlier, they gloss over his role in the Empire, which I thought was a huge mistake. They should have spent the first 40 minutes of him fighting with the Empire and maybe uncovering the horrors of what the Empire is really about and coming to that realization. But they gloss over his role with the Empire. And then all of a sudden it becomes this heist film. So now they're on this train trying to heist this energy source. And I'm like, okay. Then they lose that supply and they go to apologize to the main baddie. And they're like, well, we can make it up to you by doing it all over again. Really? That's a movie? That's a story? Now they're going to do another heist again, stealing the same thing they stole earlier? I thought the story was very, very weak. And the fact that they kept alluding to things that'll happen in the next movie, when they said, oh, there's a gangster on Tatooine who's looking for some crew. It's like, oh, are we going to see that in this movie? No, you're going to have to wait till the next movie.
Well, I mean, of course you want to bait people to go to the next one. I mean, otherwise Infinity Wars could have, why don't we just bring everybody back right now? Like, I mean, of course you got to set it up for the next one.
Yeah, but I felt that made the movie feel incomplete, that it was unfinished.
Well, they all are always incomplete.
Well,
except for Rogue One. They're
well,
always
that and the original Star Wars. Now let's get to that. The original Star Wars to me will always be number one on my list. Now, I know a lot of people say Empire is the greatest movie in the entire series, but for me, it'll always be Star Wars because it's self-contained. It has a definitive ending. Lucas thought that he would never get a chance to make a sequel, so he picked the story that was most self-contained and was the simplest story to tell. And so not only was it revolutionary when it came out and changed my life as a kid, but if they never made another one, it was, to me, it was a perfect movie, just a standalone movie. Then when Empire comes out, yes, Empire was great, had some of the greatest moments in the entire series, but they ended on that cliffhanger. And I remember as a teenager being pissed that we're going to have to wait 3 years to have this resolved. And I don't like that. I don't like being left hanging. I want a complete movie, a standalone movie.
Didn't you say, and I hate to keep referencing Infinity Wars, but didn't you say you didn't mind the wait for that?
It's only 1 year.
Okay, well, Solo, I mean, we're at a different era now where we don't have to wait 3 years.
Yeah.
So we know the next one's already, being filmed, or the script's already written, or.
But since you brought up Infinity War, and I think Rich may have brought this up on a past podcast, I think the movie holds up as a movie on its own. I mean, yeah, everyone's thinking, oh my God, where's this going to go? How's it going to get resolved? But if the movie just ended right there and they said, okay, we're done with it, I would think that was the greatest ending in the history of comic book movies.
Okay, well, how about this? Maybe you're a victim of being such a Star Wars fan, because if you had never seen Star Wars before and watched Solo, you wouldn't know where he's going to go work for this gangster or whatever. It was just like the next phase that he's going on to, and it could have ended with that, and you never had to even know. He's just off to go do his next thing.
I think all movies should strive to be self-contained and not hint at a sequel. I think it's cheap to hint at a sequel and say...
But what I'm saying is maybe it's not hinting at a sequel. Maybe it is to you because you know the whole layout of the Star Wars universe.
Oh, I don't know. I'm looking at this as a Disney money grab.
Well, isn't that what everything is now?
If Lucas would have thought when he was making Star Wars that that he was going to be able to make a sequel, I'm sure he would have left Star Wars on a cliffhanger too, because his whole premise for it was to harken back to the days of the old serials of like Flash Gordon and stuff, which every single episode ended on a cliffhanger.
Right. And I get that. And those serials, though, were like shorts, and they were designed to bring people back into the theater to see how that was going to get resolved. And I get that. I see that. But that doesn't necessarily make for a good movie. So I'm not a fan of the cliffhanger. I think every movie should be a standalone, be able to hold up on its own merit, and not cast that line out there and try to reel people
let's
back
just say, and this is a possibility now because the movie didn't do well at the box office. Let's just say that they don't do a sequel to it. You could leave it like that. I mean, you could leave it like that. You're not going to get the rest of the Kira and Darth Maul story, but as far as like Han and Chewie, you could fill in the blanks between what happens when they're heading to Tatooine to meet Jabba the Hutt,
Right.
and what happens in A New Hope.
But see, that makes me think of another thing about the mistake of even doing this prequel in the first place. And it's a little different than Rogue One, and I'll explain in a second. But with Solo, the mistake of going back to early in his youth is that we know the outcome. They're never in peril. Han and Chewie will never be in jeopardy because we know where the story goes. And I think that takes some of the excitement
Can't
out
the
of the
same
film.
thing be said about the Lucas prequels?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those suck.
I agree.
But like Rogue One was different because they introduced a new batch of characters who didn't appear in the original trilogy. Now, you could speculate, well, that means they're all going to die. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, that's how spoiler alert, that's how it played out. But Rogue One was different because you didn't know what the outcome was going to be of those characters that you grew fond of over the course of a 2-hour movie.
Right.
So that was a little different. I think that's what makes Rogue One intriguing. But to go back and tell somebody's origin story, I need to feel that the heroes are in peril and the mistake, I think, of going after Han Solo.
You can never do that with an origin story after a character's already been established.
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's going to be the flaw of every origin movie.
All right. So I've already established that Star Wars, the original Star Wars, and Empire Strikes Back are number 1 and 2 on my list. Brian, what are your thoughts? What is the greatest Star Wars movie in your opinion?
The Phantom Menace.
Because
let me tell you, Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks is the greatest character ever created. No, I'm kidding, of course.
Fly over this table.
I'm kidding, of course. That movie sucked. No, I being that I'm not the Star Wars guy that knows, the numbers of every ship and how many stormtroopers got blown up on Tatooine or whatever. I just watch them and like them for what they are. The original 3 that's it for me.
The gold standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree 1 and 2.
The Holy Trilogy.
Yeah. There's only one trilogy.
Right.
I was a kid. I didn't get into them huge as a kid, but I definitely liked them. I was entertained by them. We tried to slice open an AT-AT or a Tauntaun or whatever. A Tauntaun.
It's Tauntaun.
I knew that.
The trash compactor number was 3263827.
See, there you go. So we pretended to, and I had the little action figure where you could actually put him inside the belly, and thought that was the coolest thing ever and stuff. So, definitely was a pop culture thing that I was a part of and enjoyed, and that might play into it as well.
Now, I personally wouldn't have an issue if I was discussing the greatest Star Wars movies, if someone ranked some of these more recent movies above Return of the Jedi. And the only reason I say that is I watched it recently, and some of it's kind of hard to watch. There's some really great moments in it. I think the speeder bike chase is one of the greatest movie moments of all time. The lightsaber duel between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker is just epic. But there's some really silly, cheesy moments.
But is that just the test of time, though? Like, at the time, it didn't seem like that, but we've evolved so far now that, I'll reference my favorite movie, Rad, and how it's a different world now. So, people aren't racing bikes anymore.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's a big part of it, is that, do these movies stand the test of time? And with the original trilogy, on any given rainy Sunday, if one of those movies are playing on TV, I can drop everything, sit and watch these movies from beginning to end.
Serious question for you. How come every Sunday for you is a rainy Sunday?
That's this year so far. That's pretty much how it's played out.
It's always a rainy Sunday watching movies with Joe.
When it's a nice day out.
We should change the name of the podcast to Rainy Sunday.
Sundays. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. But no, those movies, the original trilogy, have really stood the test of time, and I could sit and watch any 3 of those. With the prequels, I remember watching the Phantom Menace was coming on, and I sat and I watched the first few minutes, and I was kind of getting into it. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, when they go aboard that ship, and then they try to gas them out, and then they got the lightsabers out, and they're fighting, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. And then they escape from the ship, and they end up on the planet, and Mr. Misa go poopy in my diety, and it's like, you just ruined the whole thing. He ruins the movie for me.
Really? I actually didn't mind him that much. I'm not a fan of him, but he didn't ruin it for me.
Mooey. So now, Tim, I know you love those prequels when they came out. Do you talk about your opinion of versus then and now and the benefit of hindsight?
Well, I don't know if I could say that I loved them. I saw Phantom Menace a lot of times, mainly because, well, first of all, I was working midnights. Oh, before I get into this, let me defend Return of the Jedi. And certain days, I would rank Return of the Jedi as one of my favorites. A lot of that has to do with something that was like synonymous with the movies, as far as I was concerned when I was a kid, were the toys. And so, the first Star Wars toys were cool, but I was more into the aliens than anything. So then when Empire came out, I didn't like Empire that much because there wasn't like all the aliens in it. You had the Tauntaun and you had the Wampa, but you didn't have like the cool aliens from the Cantina from the first movie that came out.
Right.
So when Return of the Jedi came out, the first 45 minutes with all the Jabba the Hutt stuff, I was just like, oh my god, yeah. So and I remember that summer it played like all summer, and I lived like a block away from my local movie theater, the one that I still go to all the time, Oxford. But um, so I saw that a ton of times. I would just go and I'd be like the only one in the theater watching Return of the Jedi like throughout the summer, and so I have a lot of feelings for that movie more so than the previous two.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, but yeah, you would probably have to rank Star Wars one. I remember seeing that with my family at the drive-in.
Mhm.
But getting to the prequels, yeah, I was searching for. I remember like seeing Phantom Menace so many times because I was like, there's got to be something going on here. Lucas has to be like putting some Easter eggs in here or some foreshadowing in here where some awesome stuff is going to happen in the next movie. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But
I have to question why he settled on that whole Trade Federation storyline. That doesn't appeal to kids. That doesn't appeal to grown-ups.
well, I remember hearing a story, and who knows if it's true, but I remember like hearing a story, when I was a kid, that because obviously when they re-released Star Wars, it said Episode 4, A New Hope. So I remember hearing a story that like Lucas said, well, if I would have released number one the way that I had outlined it, it would have been too boring.
Mhm.
So maybe he knew that it was going to be boring,
it's
but
just
maybe he
such a-
just thought that maybe that's why he added Jar Jar
Uh,
because
when,
he thought it would be too boring
yeah,
without
right.
him.
When Phantom Menace was on recently, I caught the closing scenes where Queen Amidala turns to those alien species. I forget what they were, and she's like, "You can kiss your trade franchise goodbye." Like that was like her Bruce Willis catchphrase or something. And I'm like, that is an awful, awful line. Like that's how they kind of ended the movie with that. And I will never understand why they went with that storyline. The Trade Federation.
Yeah, you would think that he could have changed it up a little bit at some point.
All right, so if we agree that Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi are 1, 2, and 3, the Holy Trilogy, the question is now what comes in at number 4? Now, for me, 4 and 5 are interchangeable. I could listen to arguments for either one being the fourth greatest Star Wars movie of all time. Right now on my list, I have Rogue One in at number 4, but it could easily be The Force Awakens. With the anticipation of The Force Awakens, and there was so much expectation there to actually come in and deliver, blew me away. And my original critique that I posted online immediately after seeing it was that The Force Awakens is the best acted Star Wars movie out of all of them. I thought there were some really solid performances from Daisy Ridley. Is that her name?
Yes.
Daisy Ridley. And even Adam Driver. I thought they put in some solid performances. And I can't leave out John Boyega. I thought he was just fantastic.
Even Poe Dameron. I
Yeah.
can't think of his real name. But
Yeah. So that was the best acted movie out of all of them. Now, a lot of people criticize it, saying it was just a reboot of Star Wars, and I see that. But at least it felt like a Star Wars movie, and it just brought that joy back. And I just was riveted the entire time, just fully immersed and engrossed watching that movie, and just walked away thinking that was great. So
Was it self-contained?
yes, I think it was self-contained. I really do. So Ryan, if you had to pick your fourth favorite Star Wars movie, taking into consideration the prequels and all the recent releases, what falls behind Return of the Jedi for you?
The Battle for Endor.
The TV movie. Eh?
I'm kidding.
I forgot to put that on my.
My daughter watches those all the time,
Yeah.
and they're not as bad as I remember.
Um,
They really aren't
uh,
for that time. I mean,
Ewoks were great. Wicket was my favorite character for a long time, and
I have no problem
I
with
like
the Ewoks.
I like Wicked.
The only issue I have with all the Ewoks versus Empire thing is what the hell do stormtrooper armor, what is that supposed to protect you from? If it can't protect you from a teddy bear hitting you with a rock, then get rid of it. I don't know.
I mean they're strong, strong little guys. This is where it gets dicey for me because I feel like, and even Ethan, who is 11 years old, he came up to me the other day and he's like, I feel like Disney's ruining this franchise.
Mhm.
And
Was this after he had seen Solo or no?
this is before
Okay.
he actually,
But after The Last Jedi.
yes,
Okay.
he actually liked Solo.
Okay.
He was, I wish he would have came today because he actually was pretty insightful on it and pretty adult thinking for a young man. He also had low expectations for the movie and was suspect of the casting and everything, but he enjoyed it. But he still says, like, I don't know, he doesn't buy into what Disney's doing here. And he, as an 11-year-old, thinks they're just trying to make money. So
Yeah.
that is interesting to me that, that's not something he's overhearing me say. That's his actual own thoughts.
Well, how much money did they pay to get it? How much money did they pay Lucasfilm? Like $4 billion or $6 billion?
Something
or
like that.
Ridiculous.
something like
It,
that.
it
So,
was, I think it was like $3 billion or something. And when the first movie grossed almost $2 billion, people started saying Lucas may have gotten screwed on this because
Well,
Disney made their investment back almost with the Force Awakens.
okay.
and I mean, that's not even, let's go back to, I'm forgetting his name right now. Oh my gosh. Yogurt. Merchandising. Merchandising. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any Spaceballs sound effects or anything.
So it's, the movies don't have to do that well because they sell so much junk.
Mhm.
You can buy, pretty much everything. So I know I just went to Toys R Us and dropped a boatload, even with their big sales they got going on since they're going out of business. So
Yeah.
mostly Star Wars stuff. So I think, their money's aspect's just fine. So I would say if I had to pick one, though, it'd probably be The Force Awakens. Rogue One, for me, I didn't like it.
Didn't do it for you, huh?
It did not do it for me at all.
Now, why do you suppose that is? Because there was
I
no
don't know,
original
like,
characters in it?
It could be a little bit of that. It could be because everybody died, and so you invest your time in these characters, and then they're just gone.
Mhm.
And it didn't feel that great of a Star Wars movie to me. Like you said, Force Awakens had that Star Wars feel to it, and I didn't love that movie, to be honest. But it did. I knew where I was. I was watching a Star Wars movie. And there's a lot of things in these new movies that piss me off, like killing off Han Solo and Leia and Luke. Like,
Well, they haven't killed Leia yet.
Not in the movies yet.
Not technically.
But,
Yeah.
with Harrison Ford, I have to imagine, everyone knows how Harrison Ford is. And he only seems to have recently started to embrace the whole Star Wars thing. For the longest time, he
'cause
tried
now-
to distance
'cause now
himself
he
from
doesn't
it.
have anything to do with it.
Right. But I imagine this conversation where somebody, whether it was J.J. Abrams or whatever, approached Harrison Ford and said, look, we're rebooting the franchise. We want you to be part of it. And I could just picture Harrison saying, I'll come back on one condition, kid. You got to kill me off. You got to kill off Han Solo.
Yes, because he wanted to be killed off in Return of the Jedi.
Exactly. And so I think that he would not have come back if J.J. Abrams didn't agree to do it. And I think his death is, in my opinion, one of the most poignant, moving, impactful moments of the entire Star Wars slate of films. It really was like a punch to the gut for me, and I thought it was very effective. So
yeah, I still didn't like it. Can be effective and not enjoyable, right?
You should not have come back.
that's not the clip I wanted to play, but it's just as appropriate too.
Fair enough.
All right, so Force Awakens you'd put in at number 4.
Yeah.
Tim, do you agree with that?
No, I would put Rogue One definitely at number 4. I really liked it a lot, and part of it is because they killed him off. Because I would have been very pissed off if they would have had, uh, Jin live or something. Because it'd be like, well, where is she then in the
Yeah.
rest of the films?
It might
Right.
not have been a
Um,
bad move. I just didn't
And
sit well.
But I was kind of kind of wondering though when it was getting to the end of the movie though, because I was like, is Disney really gonna let them kill off all these characters that we just you know grown have grown to like care about in the last couple hours? But they had to. I mean, really, they had to. Uh,
Not all
but I don't know.
movies need to have the happy Hollywood ending, and I've come to embrace that over the last few years. As much as I love going to the theaters and seeing the hero get the girl and everybody ride off into the sunset, not all movies have to be
And
like that. And I like the fact that Rogue One ended like that.
Yeah, and plus it makes more sense why they named episode 4 A New Hope.
Hmm.
Rogue One kind of shows why.
All right. So now that takes care, let's say our top 6. So original trilogy, or actually that's the top 5. Original trilogy, Force Awakens, Last Jedi. Do you feel that, or I'm sorry, Rogue One, Force Awakens. Now, do you feel that The Last Jedi ranks
They're
above
assuming.
the prequels or below the prequels?
Well,
What are your thoughts?
let me first talk about Force Awakens. I initially did not love it, but I would put that at number 5.
Mhm.
I initially did not love it, and my my biggest complaint, I didn't really think it was all that much like the first movie. My biggest complaint was another Death Star, because we saw that obviously in number 1. We saw that in number 3.
Yep.
Well, 4 and 6. Um, so that was my big issue with it, because and it was almost like an afterthought. It was like, I mean, maybe they did that on purpose, where it was like, okay, we did it already 2 times, and now it's easy to do.
Right.
It just seemed like an afterthought almost, to be able to like go in there and blow it up now. That was my big issue with it, but once I saw it a couple more times, and then once I bought it on DVD, I would definitely put it at a solid number 5.
Okay.
But
So what about Last Jedi? Where does Last Jedi rank?
I hate The Last Jedi. I really do, and mainly because I feel, and it's a pro wrestling term, but I feel that they let Rian Johnson, go into business for himself. Um, how do you make? I mean, basically, that is almost a self-contained movie to me. How do you do that in the middle of a trilogy? What is the point? When that movie was over, I'm like, I don't care what happens in the next one now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it really is not even a true sequel, because everything that they set up in Force Awakens, he just ignored.
Right.
And I just, why bother to set all this stuff up if you're just going to totally ignore it and destroy it?
Yeah. I agree. I feel like it didn't have that Star Wars feel to it. All the sequences with Finn going over to the casino were superfluous, that they did not contribute to the story or plot in any way. It was just busy work to give Finn something to do.
Right.
And I found myself absolutely miserable during those scenes. And I actually found myself sitting in the theater thinking, I hate this movie right now.
Mhm.
And I never thought I
Same
would be
with
able
me.
to say that about a Star Wars movie, that I was sitting there hating the movie in the theater. Now, it did kind of redeem itself a little bit later in the movie, and I thought the action picked up. I thought it got a little entertaining. But overall, when the movie was over, I thought it was one of the poorest entries of the entire Star Wars list of movies. It's instantly forgettable. I have no desire to buy it on DVD. I have no desire to ever watch it again. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
How come every time I talk you got a cough?
Because that's why I'm throwing it to you. So I can talk.
I also did not like this movie. However, I will say that I did like it better than the 3 prequels. But that's not saying a lot. I had a lot of problems with it. one of them is like what you just said, going to the casino for no reason at all and riding those stupid things out in the field that didn't make any sense to me, and this girl that falls in love with him that I don't even care about and was wanting her to die. And then Laura Dern's character, I wanted to smack her in the face, and it was ridiculous that she waited so long before she did something. She watched all these people dying,
Ship after ship.
yeah,
getting
like, oh
destroyed.
geez, oh geez, oh geez, and like there were so many different things she could have done, from hyperspace and have them follow to running into their ship. Like there was a million different things she could have done, and instead she just sat there and watched, and that frustrated me to no end. And I was actually like yelling at the screen, like, "Come on!" Like,
Yeah.
you said it picked up towards the end for you. It didn't for me. I just got more and more angry as the
Well,
thing went on.
I guess I found myself entertained, but I do have to admit that I got angry when it was revealed that Luke was a force projection or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
I thought that was a cop out.
Mhm.
That here we're like, oh my God, look how strong and powerful Luke is. They're shooting him, and he dusts off his shoulder, and it's like that's amazing. And hooray, he's coming to save the day. And then when you find out he's a force projection, I'm like, that's a cop out.
And
I
then
was
by doing
really
that,
disappointed.
he basically kills himself. Like he used all his
Yeah,
forceness.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it took his life for that. Like
Yeah.
that was the worst sacrifice ever.
And
Yeah.
why didn't his mechanical hand like drop to the ground when he disappeared? That's maybe
There's-
that'll be addressed in the sequels. I don't know.
There's just a lot of things that they could have did differently. That would have made me like it more or at all. And I mean, the way they handled Luke was just not right.
And even
I don't
Mark
think-
Hamill was vocal about it initially, saying that he didn't like the direction they took his character in, and then I think Disney kind
And
of
what was the
cut him a
point?
check and said, "Shut up," and he was like, "Oh no, it was good."
But what was the point of that? I mean, it did it really do what he was a distraction? Like that's
Right.
like it was dumb.
Yeah.
I thought it was dumb. Now, as much as so I said I like this better than the prequels, but I will say this was a bigger disappointment of a movie. So I know that kind of almost sounds a little contradicting, but I was just disappointed with the movie and what it did. But I had no expectations of what those prequels were going to do. So
Right.
I think that's why they weren't a disappointment.
Yeah, I couldn't call him a disappointment either because as I was sitting in the theater watching the prequels, I was enjoying him. I was laughing and cheering and getting into it, and I enjoyed him in the theaters. I think my issue with the prequels is that they just haven't stood up to the test of time. They're
Right.
not as repeatedly watchable as the original trilogy.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that because I saw all the prequels more than once. I saw them quite a few times, the Lucas prequels, but yeah, I have seen Last Jedi twice,
Mhm.
but just because I wanted to see if I missed something the first time.
Now, you in agreement with me that the prequels got better with each movie? Do you feel that Revenge of the Sith was better than Attack of the Clones, and was Attack of the Clones better than Phantom Menace, or do you reverse that order? What are your thoughts on the prequel? How would you rank the prequels?
I didn't like Sith. I would go probably Attack of the Clones, Phantom Menace, then Revenge of the Sith.
So you'd put Sith at the bottom, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really like it.
It's hard for me to say. I really did not like the ending. I liked the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, but by the time it ended, I was like we talked about this before, and this goes with Solo too. The backstory that we have in our heads, like when we would play with our toys when we were younger, even in the original like Star Wars, the battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin was a hell of a lot better than what they put on the screen in Revenge of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
Or even the whole backstory for them being Jedis together was better in our imaginations than what Lucas put out there. I hated that last lightsaber fight. It was like a video game.
It really was. It was like a side-scrolling video game where you're on a rock floating over lava or whatever, and you're jumping from rock to rock while you're still trying to engage the opponent. And it seemed like it was motivated and inspired by side-scrolling arcade games, and that's not a movie make.
At the time, though, wasn't that kind of how movies were being made, though, with the what can we do to make a video game? Because that's where we're going to make our money.
Oh yeah, I'm sure a lot of thought went into that, and it's kind of heartbreaking, you know. I mean, Lucas wasn't thinking of that when he wrote the first one. How can we? I mean, I know he was on the ground floor when it came to marketing and merchandising a movie, but I don't think he was thinking of that when he made it. Unfortunately, I think the prequels were all about how can we market this? How can we merchandise it? Introducing the army of droids and changing up the stormtrooper uniforms so they can sell new toys or whatever. It seemed like that was the main motivation of the prequels was to sell toys.
And they did that again in the last one.
Speaking of that is one issue that I had with Solo too. Why did the stormtroopers look? Because the stormtroopers changed, every couple of years in the prequels, and then now they're changed in Force Awakens. So Solo takes place what, roughly?
It's about 10 years before A New Hope.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I guess, but the stormtroopers were exactly like they were in A New Hope.
Yeah.
In Solo.
There were a couple minor differences, but for
Was
the
there?
most part,
Okay, I didn't
they were
notice that.
pretty similar. And then there were some other types of troopers we've never seen before, like the ones I
Yeah.
kind of jokingly call the Vin Diesel Triple X troopers, where they have the fur collars and the long
Oh,
coats.
right.
And
Yeah.
I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. They look kind of
Yeah.
Norwegian or something. I don't know. But it's
Pimp hand is strong.
what's that?
Said their pimp hand is strong.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So I would probably rate the prequels myself. I'd probably rate them the same way as Ryan. I would probably do Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then Phantom Menace.
Okay. I go with Revenge of the Sith at the top, Attack of the Clones in the middle, and I find The Phantom Menace one of the hardest Star Wars movies to watch repeatedly because of Jar Jar, because of Jake Lloyd's
Lloyd.
performance, because of Natalie Portman's performance. And even Natalie Portman today apologizes for her performance in these prequels. All of those performances are really hard to watch. To me, it seemed like the only ones that were having fun were Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. I thought they were kind of having fun doing what they were doing.
Jar Jar was having fun.
Jar Jar was. Darth Maul was.
Now, Darth Maul, I was talking to somebody earlier about this today. I do think that Darth Maul is one of the greatest Star Wars villains of the entire film series. And it is a shame that they kind of ended it so quickly, even though we now find out that wasn't necessarily his fate. But I did love Darth Maul in this movie. But I think out of all the movies to date, The Phantom Menace for me is one of the hardest ones to watch over and over and over again.
Then why did you
I
get
agree.
that Jar Jar tattoo?
I didn't think you could see that.
You know what though? That's something that I hadn't even thought about, and I don't know why. Like I hadn't even thought about like being able to see Darth Maul fighting on screen again, even though it's like right there in Solo. That didn't even like, I don't know, that
Maybe.
Now,
didn't
see,
even like cross my mind.
Might
That
get to it.
That's
Yeah.
that's what Rich had a problem with, was that they brought him back. That's what
That
ruined
was the
Solo.
big scene. I know he was
Yes.
cryptic. He
Yeah.
posted on Facebook that there was one scene that pretty much ruined the entire movie for him.
Yes.
okay, but
And after seeing it, I didn't know what scene he was referring to.
I
so-
knew as soon as I saw what he was talking about. I mean, I didn't know going into it. But do you think that, I mean, the way he was talking was that it ruined every other movie and it ruined all
Right.
the timelines. Do you think that he thought that meant that it took place before?
No, he
Phantom
said.
Menace?
Well, he said that it messes with the timeline and that it means to him that nobody's dead. Darth Vader didn't die. Like nobody died. Like every bad guy can come back now,
Mhm.
and nobody died.
Okay.
And so he
well,
said that's why it ruined it for him.
Okay. I mean, I told him that, and he might not have known this, that is like a long established thing that they brought Darth Maul back in the comics and in the books and in the cartoons that way with the mechanical, mechanical legs now. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I
Yeah.
don't know that it'll change it for him
I don't
either.
think it did.
Yeah.
But because he thinks it's pandering to the fanboys, and maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Oh, it's definitely pandering. To the
Pandering
fanboys.
to the, I would say it's pandering to the expanded universe fans because they they were highly upset when Disney said that all that stuff was going to be wiped out of canon, or most of it was going to be wiped out of
Right.
canon. So maybe they're just throwing them a bone.
Now, since you brought up Battle for Endor, I feel obligated to bring up the Cartoon Network's Clone Wars series, not the recent computer animated series, even though I thought that was really well done. but I want to go back to 2003 and 2005 when the Cartoon Network was creating these Clone Wars shorts around the time the prequels were coming out. And I think that if you were to take all of those shorts from those 2 seasons and edit it together into one film, I think it would rank among the greatest Star Wars movie out of all of them. I thought they were exciting and fun, and Darth Sidious was so terrifying and intimidating in the cartoon, where in the movie they kind of weakened him quite a bit. But the Cartoon Network's of Clone Wars, I think, was one of the greatest entries of the entire Star Wars universe. Do you agree with that, Tim?
Yeah, definitely. I remember watching it thinking, why couldn't the movies have been more like this?
Yeah.
I mean, it's war, and cartoon wise, they made it look more realistic
Yeah.
than what they did with the movies.
Yeah.
I never got into them. Never saw them.
Yeah. Now, the animated series, I found them entertaining, and whenever they would introduce a character from the original trilogy, that's when I kind of got excited. For the most part, I was indifferent about the animated, computer animated series. Did you get into that at all?
No, I've seen a couple episodes. That's it.
Now, I guess they're considering that canon, that they're
Mhm.
saying the events of the
Yes.
Clone Wars computer animated series all tie into the films, and they went as far as putting little Easter eggs in The Force Awakens. I guess the ghost ship appears somewhere on screen, and Chopper the droid appears on screen. So
Yeah.
they're kind of knighting it and saying, yes, you are canon to the Star Wars universe. I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, I do too.
So with the few minutes we have remaining in the podcast, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about the future of Star Wars. So they've already announced the
We're
Boba
just
Fett.
gonna gloss over the holiday special.
Yes, we're going to gloss right over that. The Boba Fett movie has been announced. Your thoughts? Now, as a kid, Boba Fett, he was mysterious, didn't know what he was underneath that armor, even though they've since ruined it. Oh, look at Ryan showing off his Boba Fett socks. Yeah. So Boba Fett has always been one of my favorite characters. I always questioned why George Lucas decided to toss him into the Sarlacc pit like he did in Return of the Jedi. I felt like that was kind of a middle finger to the fans. That in Empire, everyone was like, "Oh my God, this character's so cool. You want to know more about him?" And George Lucas said, "Yeah, watch this," and sent him like a screaming bitch into the Sarlacc pit because a blind Han Solo flipped a switch that launched him. And I'm like, that's not a dignified way for this character to go out. So now he's going to have his own standalone movie. I'm sure they're going to have to take some of that origin stuff that appeared in the prequels and somehow work that into there. So I'm excited. I'm optimistic. Doesn't matter which actor they get to play him because he pretty much wears that armor. So I'm actually a little excited about a standalone Boba Fett movie. I hope they incorporate some of the other bounty hunters. I think that would be fun. Ryan, what was your thought when you heard that the next standalone movie is going to be a Boba Fett movie?
I was like, oh, sweet. I kind of feel the same way you did. I thought he was a great character. I thought he just looks like a badass. And I'm really, being that I'm not a super fanboy, I'm actually excited to see this film and to see what they do with it, and hope that they can take what, back in the day looked really cool and even, and do a little bit better with it and what we can come up with. So, yeah, really excited for it. I think he's one of my favorite characters.
There was a book that came out years ago, part of the expanded universe. It was really fascinating. It was one of my favorite Star Wars books, where some author, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, but it was like 6 short stories, and each short story tackled the perspective of a different bounty hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Boba Fett, IG-88, Bosk, Dengar, Zuckuss, and Forla.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing how they all intertwined, and they made reference to some things that happened on screen, like in Empire Strikes Back, when Chewbacca's in the furnace room looking for C-3PO, you see IG-88 just kind of laying against the wall in the background, and you think, ooh, I wonder what the story is there. Well, this novel addressed that and said that Boba Fett and IG-88 were racing back to Cloud City to intercept Han, and Boba Fett dispatched IG-88, threw him in the junk room. And I'm like, wow, I would love to see something like that more explored in the movies. So I'm hoping if when they do the Boba Fett movie that they might bring back some of those bounty hunters and see their rivalries. What
Do
are you
you
thinking?
think? Do you think it's going to be this era then? Do you think it's going to be around the Solo era? I mean, I'm just asking because I bought that book and I had no idea what was going to be in it. And there was also one, Tales of the Cantinas, and they hit like a lot of the characters in that one. And then later on, they did Jabba's Palace and a lot of the people that were in Jabba's Palace. So I loved all those books.
Mhm.
And they did the same thing, like little like off-screen stuff, or that didn't mean anything. They would like incorporate into the stories. So when I'm reading the Boba Fett story in that one, I had no idea that that they were gonna do it where he escapes the Sarlacc pit
Right.
and lives. So would they be able to? Do you think they would be able to start that movie there and do something in between? In between, I mean, there's really no reason why they couldn't, because I mean that's at the end of Return of the Jedi, and there's no reason why Boba Fett would have been gone to Endor or anything.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing about Boba Fett is that they can go earlier in his career and maybe explore why Darth Vader said no disintegrations, or they can go post Sarlacc pit. They can do anything with Boba Fett. So I'm interested in seeing in what time period they choose to tell his story at.
What if they make it a girl?
Well, they can't because they've already established that he's a clone in the earlier
Okay,
prequels.
but I did read a theory though that they were gonna make Boba Fett at one time like more of a mythical thing, that a bunch of other people
like the Dread Pirate Roberts.
were under the armor.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. I wouldn't have an issue with that at all. I'd be curious to see how it plays out. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed this in Solo. I actually found this distracting in Solo that in the scenes on the one character's yacht, there was a Mandalorian armor in the background. Did you see that?
I
And-
didn't notice it, but when I was reading about the Easter eggs,
Oh, my
saw-
eye was drawn to it because I thought it was Boba Fett's armor because it had the little radar thing sticking up, and I'm like, is that Boba Fett's armor? And it wasn't until I looked online afterward. They said, no, it's not Boba Fett's armor, but it's a Mandalorian
yeah,
Old Republic armor. And I thought, well,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So,
yeah.
so that's maybe a little Easter egg, little nod to Boba Fett right there.
Speaking of that, the Game of Thrones people, writers, directors, whatever that they hired for Star Wars movies, they're talking about them doing a Knights of the Old Republic movie.
That would be interesting. I mean, obviously, that would be a completely fresh and unique take, keeping it in the Star Wars universe, but having free reign to just go anywhere with the story. That would be really interesting.
I think that'd be cool
Mhm.
because I mean in my mind, even with the prequels, they never really showed, I don't think, what the Jedis were supposed to be
Mhm.
like originally.
Right.
So I think that could be cool.
Yeah. Now, what are your expectations for episode 9, is it? What do you think should or will happen in episode 9? Ryan, I'll throw it to you first. Where do you think the
should-
story's going to go?
to hell?
Think so?
Every movie that's come out has gone down for me. So
Yeah.
it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, I think. So
I'm
I
hoping
have-
they're going to redeem themselves in episode 9.
you would hope, because it's taken away from the Star Wars lore that it is. It's this culture, and it's something. Even though I'm not a fanboy, like I've mentioned multiple times already, it still has meaning and merit, and what it means to cinema history and stuff like that. So I'd like to see them get back to that point where it matters.
Do you believe, who was it who said to Rey in The Last Jedi that you're just a scavenger and your parents weren't significant?
That was Kylo Ren.
That was Kylo Ren said that
Yeah.
to her. Do you believe it, or do you think he was playing mind games on her? I still think her parents are going to be significant. I think it's going to be a big reveal in episode 9.
Oh, okay. That was another. Let me just say this. That was another thing when Richie and I were talking about it. He somehow thinks that Kira, that they're going to say Kira and Darth Maul are Rey's parents. I'm like, I don't think that that's where they're going with that.
He's delusional. No, I don't.
But yeah, I think maybe because fans were so disappointed with that J.J. Abrams is going to change that. So you're probably right. I
Yeah.
think that he will reveal that they are, because what I've read recently is that what happened was J.J. had the whole outline for the next two movies after Force Awakens, but he could not direct The Last Jedi because he was already attached to something else. That's why they brought in Ryan Johnson. Well, Ryan Johnson did his own thing and then supposedly got with JJ and was like, "Hey, are you okay with these changes?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So, and it sounds like he went totally against what JJ had laid out.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that somehow JJ can bring it back around and put those original ideas back in there somehow. I mean, first of all, the Knights of Ren, they were building that up like that was going to be like a big thing, and then they never even show them
Yeah.
in Last Jedi at all.
Now, one intriguing thing when Kylo said that your parents are insignificant and blah 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 blah, I actually kind of found that intriguing too, because one of the things they hinted at in the Last Jedi is that you don't necessarily need to come from Jedi parents to have Jedi powers, and they kind of established that with one of the kids that was cleaning the stables or whatever, where he like reach out and a mop like flew into his hand or whatever, and that kind of set the tone for a possible outcome that everyone is born with these powers, and it's up to you to develop them. So that could be another path that the movies go.
I would have
Terrible.
I actually have no problem with that. It's better than freaking midichlorians.
Oh, midichlorians were the worst. Trying to come up with some sort of scientific explanation for the Force. Give me a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't agree with that?
I don't think everybody should be able, like, everybody should have the Force, and you just got to be able to hone it or whatever. Like, I think that takes away from how special certain people are, and how, why people are trying to protect them and
Yeah.
and cater to them.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm still kind of holding out hope that Rey's parents are significant. Either she's the daughter of Luke or something. I feel like there's got to be more to the story
Ooh.
than what we've seen so far.
Plot twist: it's Leia and Luke's kid.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
So, okay, so Disney basically has announced that Ryan Johnson's going to do his own trilogy, probably a takeoff of that kid, a solo movie, or not a solo, Boba Fett movie, a Obi-Wan movie now, and then possibly turning Solo into a trilogy, and then now the Knights of the Old Republic.
Mhm.
Do you think that Solo kind of bombing at the box office is going to put the brakes on some of this?
No, because it's still. I mean, it's still going to make a lot of money, I think, and it's going to justify their investment. I think there's some loose ends they need to tie up, so I'm kind of counting on them at least doing one more solo movie, just to address some of the things that they dropped in the first one. But with the last minute or so, I'm just kind of curious. Are you guys okay with the new Star Wars movie every year, or do you think we need a break?
I'm okay with it if they make good movies.
Mhm.
So, and I guess even in bad movies, it's fine. One a year is okay. Like, I agree. Some people said that they don't think the Solo should have came out now and should have stuck with the original Christmas release.
Right.
That's what I said.
Was it maybe did you
they
Facebook
should've.
that? Maybe that's where I read it or
I
something.
think I did
but,
put that on Facebook. But yeah.
but I agree with that. So maybe, same time every year, so it's an actual year.
Yeah. I mean, when the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out, they were always coming out around December. So I thought that was a cool thing. So when Disney started doing this with Star Wars, I thought, hey, that's cool, But for whatever reason, they wanted. Well, I mean, I know the reason, because they wanted to release it the same day that the original Star Wars was released, and
Right.
that's what they did. They were probably like, hey, if we release it, that it's the same date.
And with that, we're just about out of time. I'm sure we'll be talking about Star Wars movies again next year when Episode 9 comes out. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode of Movies for Dumb Guys.
How do we not even talk about Yoda?